reflect on that. So I'll start by talking about the format of the book, and then I'll just kind of go through the chapters and then focus on one chapter, and we can kind of just dialogue about that. So I wanted to have a book where, well, let me back up. My thought process is, it's difficult for me to read a book and go all the way through it and focus and finish it. So I wanted to write a book for people with ADD like me, where, you know, you can kind of see different chapters, focus on that, kind of get through that, and then go back to the book later. So that's how my book is formatted. It's 9 chapters, and every chapter has a challenge in the African American community, and then it has 4 to 5 solutions for that challenge. And the first thing I'd like to say is that, you know, even though the book says it's a new Black America, this is not about placing blame on other races at all. A lot of people kind of make that assumption that it's, you know, a new Black America and the man has brought us down. This is the complete opposite of that. This is about African Americans being honest about where we are as a people and how we hold ourselves down and how we can overcome the issues that we have with each other. So I talk about things like crabs in the bucket syndrome, you know, just our mentality, our obsession with material things, our criminal behavior, all of that. I talk about us and what we can do, because we can't control what the world, how the world views us to some degree. We just can't. But we can control a lot of how we treat each other. So that's how the book is set up, and that's where I came from with it. And with that being said, I'm kind of breeze through the chapters and give you an overview of what each one is about, and then I'll focus on one particular chapter. And then we can kind of talk about that. I can ask some questions and see how you feel about it. So, the first chapter is the family foundation. And I wanted to start with family because, you know, there are more interesting topics, you know, and when I talk about relationships, and some of the topics are really funny in here. And it's some things that we don't really want to discuss, but they need to be put out there, and I'm the person to do that. So I love being that person, and I'll get into it later, but I get people saying, no, you can't talk about that. I'm like, why? I didn't create these issues in our culture. I'm just speaking on it, and somebody needs to talk about it. So, but anyway, I start with the family foundation. And I start with this because before we can address any of our social ills, we have to talk about the things that happen right under our own roof when we're children, you know, and that's the issue that really concerned me. So some of the topics in that chapter are challenge 1, a lack of commitment. Challenge 2, child abuse. But let me back up. When I talk about a lack of commitment, I talk about the fact that so many of us don't think that committing to a relationship is important. It's almost like, you know, having a child is okay. When you have open conversations, it's almost like people feel like, oh, it's okay to just have a child, but you're going to marry somebody? Oh, that's a big commitment. That's crazy. Why would you get married? Oh, my gosh. You're going to have the ball and chain? Don't do that, because you're going to be unhappy in a few years. But then you'll have somebody say, oh, I'm having a baby. I'm supposed to be like, oh, good. Congratulations. It's going to work out. You know, so I talk about the way we view things. And like I said, I'm not passing judgment on anyone, but I want to be honest about our mentality. You commit to a child forever, for the rest of their life and the rest of your life. But then a lot of us walk around and, you know, we're weary of committing to another person. So I talk about the importance of that. The second challenge I talk about is child abuse. And so there's some very serious topics in here. And I reference the pink elephant in the room in terms of African American families. There's a lot of child abuse going around. You know, a lot of us joke about getting beat down with shoes and wires and, you know, and even more serious things in terms of sexual abuse. So what I do is have a list. There's a literal list in here that says these are some warning signs of a child that's being abused. And I think that's important because a lot of us never get that information. We just kind of blow it off like, you know, everybody has a rough childhood. And I'm generalizing. I'm sure this is not everybody's experience, but there are some people out there that overlook this and just don't have the information. They just don't know. So I have a very basic list.
Sure. You touch upon the mental abuse about how, you know, someone growing up, oh, you're never going to be anything.
Right.
Oh, you're never blah, 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 and how that just gets ingrained in you if you allow it to. And you grow up and all of a sudden you're not anything and then someone's fried.
Absolutely. I talk about mental abuse, and I talk about psychologically how it's important to use a different approach to raise different children. You know, a lot of our parents feel like, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child, and we'll just beat our children and curse them out and whatever, and that's going to keep them in line. The meaner we are to the children, the more in line they're going to be. And I actually talk about how that desensitizes the children. And that's why they grow up to be people that have to go to prison to understand anything, you know?
Sure. And to tag along also what she said, if you're doing the most, I guess you say, about abusing the child, you're not necessarily not doing enough, because you're not giving them enough attention to where they sure encourages them to go ahead and do or pursue whatever they want to pursue. Then it kind of like, I guess you could say, it shows them that you're, I guess you could say, neglecting them.
Right.
Or it shows that you're not doing enough. So I guess that can be a sort of an abuse as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a key point. You know, I try to expand how we look at things as opposed to everything being so simple. It really hurts me to feel like a lot of people's idea of parenting is just when they're out of line, I'm going to beat them, you know, or when they're out of line, I'm going to tell them off, you know. And so I try to expand like, hey, there are other options. We do have different types of personalities. Some children may need to get beat down to understand what's going on, and other children, you can talk to them. And so I talk about us being a little bit diverse, a little bit more diverse in terms of how we approach parenting.